if I don't need a last name anymore. Right on, just like share. Thanks, Sam, for having me. What a great conference. I've enjoyed being part of RESO for a long, long time. I was talking out in the hall with a few folks about, with Kevin from Northwest MLS about our days in the NAR buildings and things like that. So thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here. I want to do a couple disclosures. Jeff Allen and I did not coordinate our presentations. I feel like I should be writing him a check today for his support of REdistribute. I'll try to make some modifications on the fly so we're not repetitive about some of the things we want to talk about. But appreciate the opportunity to be here. Do I have a clicker here, Sam? Oh, there we go. It went by itself, magical. I do feel like I need to lay a little bit of foundation about REdistribute. So I know we're trying not to do a bunch of commercials here, but I think it's important since we're new to this space that we help everyone have a foundation for who REdistribute is and what we're trying to do. And essentially we have a lot of housing related industries such as insurance, mortgage, the GSEs, frankly, that love to use our data to make better decisions in their business. And ultimately, those better decisions benefit real estate agents, brokers, and consumers, right? When they're using better data to make better decisions, specifically around risk management and valuations, we all benefit from better decisions. And so REdistribute really aims to license data from MLSs, aggregate and normalize it to the RESO standard, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today, and license it out to what we call institutional buyers of the data. And there's significant demand for that. Many of you have experienced it in your own MLSs, but there's also the challenge that most of these institutional buyers have zero interest in going to 400 MLSs and licensing data, right? And so what has happened is that it's sort of created this vacuum that's resulted both in some gray market data, frankly, and in some, missed opportunities for MLSs to get to participate in the value that gets created from that MLS data. So thank you for humoring me for 30 seconds there on kind of who REdistribute is and what we're doing. We are founded and owned by MLSs for the benefit of brokers. And so I want to do a shout out to our founding members, Bright and CRMLS. I know Frank and Marty are here. There's a few other folks here. And our initial investing members, Beaches, Stellar, RE Colorado, and MLS PIN. These folks' leadership in being able to see the vision for what we were trying to do made it all possible. It's not inexpensive to create a company like this, and so really want to give credit to these leaders who built a solution that's going to benefit the entire industry. Alrighty, so let's dive in a little bit about kind of what we're doing and how we're benefiting from the standards that RESO has created and the work that you're doing as well. I mean, not to state the obvious here, but efficiency is critical to our project. We need to be able to onboard as much data as possible and keep that data current as quickly as possible. And so, I'm happy to report that about 90% of our ingested feeds are RESO compliant today, meaning primarily data dictionary, significantly reducing our mapping and ingestion efforts. So shout out to all that work that continues to happen. It's really important to us. One of the things that we're trying to spend quite a lot of time on is data integrity, beginning to understand how much more valuable the data can be as we increase and improve the accuracy, as we increase and improve the availability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I will say that I want to give some credit to the group that's working on the RESO common format. Because frankly, the way our data consumers on the lending and insurance side want to consume data is not necessarily via web API. If you want to look into an industry that's further behind than us, go to mortgage, right? These folks could use some modernization. And so while the feedback from our initial consumers is that they're excited about the opportunity to get faster, fresher data directly from the source, they're also a little frightened by the fact that many of them probably are going to have to refactor, right? Today, I don't think it's too much of a secret that some of these organizations are getting a flat file once a month that they're using to drive AVMs and everything else. And we all know that that didn't work very well over the last few years. And so our goal is to, kind of meet these folks in the middle a little bit. And so we do have an API, a normal web API that we can give access to, but to create a lot of efficiencies to move a lot of data quicker, we've also used JSON lines to really create an initial package of data to get folks started, and then a Delta file that can be delivered daily. We can certainly customize it to deliver it more often when the need is there. But primarily our use cases around the use of this data in these institutional buyers is daily's plenty for them. All right. Keep going. So let's talk a little bit about these institutional use cases, because inevitably, when we talk to MLSs about wanting to license their data, they want to hear what for and why and how much will I get. And so we're very, very focused on institutional use cases around risk management. Many of you have heard about services like Match and Append, where an organization wants to provide their portfolio of properties and understand a little bit more about those properties in terms of which ones are actively listed on the market. Mortgage companies and banks make money when they're lending money. So they want to do that as efficiently as possible. They want to understand which loans might be going away so that they can reinvest that money. They certainly want to understand valuations. Not a secret that the AVM business has exploded over the last 5 to 7 years. And so they're using those valuations to really understand their portfolios and make decisions about how they move loans around, how they package up and sell loans. And so all of this data is critically important to them. And again, at the end of the day, when better decisions are being made with better data, ultimately consumers, agents, and brokers all benefit from that. So I think those are, just really important kind of summary of use cases to help you all understand. One of the things I like to talk about when I do formal presentations to MLSs is what REdistribute does not do. REdistribute does not license data for public display. We want them to go directly to the MLSs. If you want to build the next latest and greatest portal or the next latest and greatest agent tool, you should definitely go to the MLSs to license data to do that. The value of REdistribute data is in the aggregate content, not the individual markets, no matter how big your market is. That was a fun conversation to have with Art and Brian, to tell them they don't matter. No, I'm kidding. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what I call the MLS data value curve, because I think it's important to understand, we all understand MLS data has value. I think diving into the details of that, and I think Jeff and team did a great job of diving into some of these details, so I won't spend too much time, but the MLS data value curve really is built on the premise that availability and accuracy are table stakes. Right? They're relying on MLS data to be a better data set than they can get anywhere else. Certainly then we start to look into how can we increase the value of MLS data. So we start to look at things like completeness, and I think that percentage of populated fields gave us a pretty good idea about where we have work to do, right? In the completeness of our data. And it's scary sometimes to think about required fields, but I look at you all today as little individual data companies. Some of you larger than others, but all of you are individual data companies. And so the value that you provide really is that compliance piece, that data collection piece that creates this robust data set. So I'd like to challenge each of you to think inside your own organizations, and I loved seeing Divina and Dan up here talking about having visibility into that analytics that really gives you a guide about what you can work on to really create a more robust data set through completeness. And I think to the extent that you can begin to envision more modern ways in which you collect that data, certainly I know Kubacasa's providing more modern ways for the collection of more robust data. I think that's something really important to keep in mind. And then the final, sort of criteria that creates the hockey stick, if you will, for MLS data value is the permissible rights to use that data. It's important, and one of the things we've done at REdistribute has been pretty firm on our license agreement that everyone makes the same royalty and everyone provides the same permissible rights to the data. It's a fair and equitable way to do it. It's how you scale a company successfully without having to spend all your money in data governance. So I think that's a really important component. This data is only valuable if you're willing to make it valuable through permissible rights that benefit, again, the agents and brokers long term. All right, this was the slide that I was going to dive into a few details that I think Jeff and team have done a good job of summarizing. But again, when we dive into the details here, I think, the value that you all bring is not just, the data set itself, but the business rules, the compliance solutions that you have around this data. I was talking to Ed Zorn at CMLS, and I think they have, what did he say? Marty, you can correct me if I'm wrong here because you're sitting here taking my picture, but I think they have a compliance person for every 2,000 agents, something like that, right? So that's a huge compliance team when you think about 100,000 agents, but they're really committed to creating quality data for the benefit of their members, but also for the benefit of what else they can do with that data. And so I think it's important to kind of point these things out in that value curve. The more effort you put in, the more ultimately I think you're going to get out of it as we start to examine the value prop of the MLS kind of in its next phase, I'll say. So certainly, completeness, we've talked about the percentage of populated fields. If y'all are still afraid to collect square footage, we might need some group therapy. For real. Like, if your MLS is still not collecting square footage, I think we should have a conversation about whether or not you're really a data company that's adding a lot of value. I'm picking on square footage. Jeff showed a bunch of other fields, but certainly this more detailed data around room sizes, around levels, around things like this, don't just help the consumer do a better job of making decisions. It provides better data downstream that makes the process more efficient. If an appraiser has more accurate access to data, or appraisal management companies have better access to data that's more accurate, and we get faster appraisals, and appraisals become less expensive, that's good for consumers at the end of the day. And again, we talked a lot about permissible use, so I won't belabor this, except to say, for us, it's important to understand we have criteria for eligible licensors, who's eligible to purchase the data to begin with, and it's not just anybody who wants it, and eligible use cases, again, primarily focused on valuations, risk management, data and analytics, things that ultimately benefit the industry. All right, I couldn't get up here and talk about standards without acknowledging that there are standards outside of RESO, and I appreciate the work Sam and team are doing to try to start, considering how we're viewed outside our little, organized real estate circle. And so most of you are familiar with an organization called MISMO. Their focus is not really on a data dictionary or transport. Their focus is primarily around the processes that allow them to quickly move large amounts of portfolio data around inside their solutions. And I think where we see the biggest intersection today with this standard organization is around the appraisal process, right? Some of you have seen Fannie and Freddie are updating the appraisal process. I think we've seen some of the folks in this room working on it as well. But we're gonna have a more modern way to approach the appraisal process, and I think that presents an opportunity for you as MLSs to play a really key role in that process. And again, I think work like the RESO common format and things like that will help really drive the value of the data that's being created and the ability for us to integrate outside of our, sort of, hey, we need this to work across all our platforms so our agents have easier lives and begin to impact other housing-related industries that ultimately benefit the consumer. Alrighty, so if we're just really talking about how we can maximize the value, and this is a little bit of a summary and a little bit of a, kind of like, no duh, Amy, but, RESO standards drive efficiency. So spend some time in that analytics platform figuring out what else, what percentage of your fields are living outside the RESO standard, and maybe a strategy for improving that amount. MLS data powers better decisions. We've talked a lot about that. Brokers and agents ultimately benefit. We've talked plenty about that. What we're finding in our market research as we launched this company last July is that there is significant demand for legally licensed direct data directly from the MLS. The burden is, again, no one is interested in going to 500 individual MLSs to get the data that they need. But the feedback that we've received is we do believe, the financial institutions, the insurance companies all believe that MLS data is the fastest and freshest property data available today and benefits them significantly. All right? The value of the data increases as the percentage of coverage increases. So to my sort of earlier point, even if your listing set is 5% of the country's listings, there's not a lot of individual value. The value is in the aggregate content, and it continues to grow as the percentage of coverage. So everything in our business is based on the percentage of listing coverage. It's the first question we get from every data consumer: what's your percentage of listing coverage? And institutional buyers, again, have been very reluctant to dive deeply into relationships directly with MLSs and having to normalize that data, ingest that data, and again, the reminder that many of them today are picking up a flat file somewhere, so they simply don't have the tech to be able to do it either. All righty, I think that's it. Oh. Just a quick, I've had this question asked to me 182 times, so that's probably everybody in the room. But kind of how's it going over at REdistribute? Where are you at? And so I'm happy to report I had to turn these slides in a week and a half ago when I did turn my slides in sort of on time. Sorry, Suzanne. But we're up to 22 signed license agreements. It's about right at 40% coverage that's already signed license agreements. We have an additional 21 MLSs that have said, we're absolutely in. We need to review that license agreement. I will say, despite my 25 years in this business, I did not give enough of my time budget to how long you all like to sit on a license agreement. So I'm happy to have individual conversations if we can find a way. I'm speaking on behalf of Greg Robertson and Dan Troop and others that have tried to pave this road. But this 55 to 60% coverage is sort of that magical coverage point at which we're providing a meaningful, close to national footprint of the data for these data consumers and makes it much more valuable. And then obviously that increases as we continue to grow. All right, that's actually it. Thank you so much for your time.